In the early morning hours of October 23, 2024, Galveston, Texas, a city known for its sunlit beaches, festive boardwalk, and the steady, comforting roll of the Gulf waves, awoke to a scene that would forever alter its sense of safety and serenity. What had begun as another crisp autumn morning took a sinister turn when, just outside the beachfront Palms Hotel, a small lifeless figure lay motionless on the cold pavement. The child was only 17 months old, a girl with a life barely begun and dreams yet to be dreamed. She had been found, bruised and broken, at the base of a towering hotel balcony from which authorities would soon learn she had fallen. Locals gathered on the sidewalks, watching in stunned silence as police and emergency responders arrived, the stillness punctuated only by the faint hum of emergency sirens. There were no answers, just gasps of horror and disbelief, a tragedy unthinkable, and yet, there it was, right in front of them. As the officers meticulously combed through the scene, collecting evidence, marking blood spots, and gathering every small detail they could, the gravity of the morning's discovery began to sink in. This was no accident, they feared. This was a crime that had shattered the innocence of a child and left a city reeling. For Galveston, it was a day that would long be remembered, a tragic event that raised painful questions and stirred emotions that would not easily subside. How could a life so young, so fragile, be cut short in such a horrific way? How could the world be so cruel? And perhaps the most harrowing question of all, what kind of betrayal could lead a mother to such an unimaginable act? In the following hours, as the story began to unfold, those questions would only deepen, drawing the community into a spiral of sorrow, disbelief, and a quest for answers. The call came through to the Galveston Police Department around 9:45 a seemingly ordinary Wednesday morning. Dispatchers listened in as a breathless caller relayed a disturbing sight, a small figure, lying still in the middle of the street. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than an abandoned blanket or bundle. But as the caller approached, a chilling realization took hold. This was not just a blanket. It was a child, wrapped and unmoving on the pavement, surrounded by a scattering of blood. The child was identified as 17-month-old Hannah Yanko. She lay wrapped tightly in a thin blanket, as though someone had intended to keep her warm. But warmth was no longer an issue. Hannah's tiny body was cold, her face pale, her chest still. The officers carefully lifted her, noting bruises and signs of injury that hinted at a terrible fall. There was little time to waste, and she was quickly rushed to the nearest hospital. In the doctors and nurses gathered around her small, fragile body, trying desperately to find signs of life. But their efforts were in vain. Within moments, Hannah was pronounced dead. A life ended before it could even truly begin. Her bruises, scrapes, and the coldness of her skin hinted at more than a simple accident. They hinted at trauma, both physical and unimaginable. For the first responders, the gravity of the situation hit hard. They had come across terrible scenes before, but this one left a haunting emptiness in the air that none could shake. As detectives pieced together the events leading up to that fateful morning, a narrative of sorrow and secrecy began to emerge. They discovered that just days before, 30-year-old Hannah Yanko had checked into the beachfront Palms Hotel with her daughter, 17-month-old Hannah Yanko, and her younger sister, Mercedes. For the two sisters, the hotel was meant to be a brief stop, a chance to escape the routines of daily life and spend time together. No one could have foreseen how tragically those plans would unravel. Mercedes later told police that the sisters had planned to check out on Wednesday morning. They woke early, preparing to pack up, yet there was a tension in the air, an unspoken heaviness that Mercedes couldn't quite place. She had sensed it earlier that week, but now, with each passing moment, it grew stronger. Hannah seemed withdrawn, her interactions clipped and subdued, a shadowed version of the sister Mercedes thought she knew. Mercedes would later recall the haunting details of that morning, replaying the words and actions over and over in her mind, searching for any sign she might have missed. They were almost ready to leave the hotel when Mercedes decided to step out to visit her fiancé, who was staying at another hotel just a few blocks away. She told Channel she would only be gone a moment, assuming she would find her fiancé and return quickly to help finish packing. In what would later feel like an eerie foreshadowing, Channel insisted that Mercedes take her time, almost urging her to leave. There was a calm urgency in her voice, an unsettling insistence that Mercedes didn't question at the time. Mercedes left, stepping out into the morning sun as Channel stayed behind, alone with her daughter. For a few quiet moments, Channel and Hannah were left together in the room, a silent calm masking what was about to become an unthinkable tragedy. To Mercedes, these moments would later replay in her memory with agonizing clarity. She would question everything about those last exchanges, the way her sister's voice had held an unnatural calm, and the chilling way she had insisted that she leave and take her time. What Mercedes couldn't know was that she would never see Hannah alive again. A short while later, Mercedes spotted Channel near her fiancé's hotel, pushing the stroller they'd used for Hannah. Mercedes felt a moment of relief, assuming Hannah was safely nestled inside, asleep or entertained by the soft toys they'd packed. But something felt wrong. Channel seemed distant, distracted. She met Mercedes' gaze but kept her responses brief, almost dismissive. When Mercedes mentioned returning to the hotel, Channel became increasingly insistent, repeating a warning that would later haunt her sister. Mercedes reluctantly complied, thinking her sister might just be anxious or tired. As she walked away from Channel, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Yet, even in her darkest worries, she couldn't have predicted what she would soon learn, that her beloved niece Hannah was already gone. And in a twist that would haunt her for the rest of her life, she would soon come to realize that those last conversations with Channel held more meaning than she could ever have imagined. Her sister's words, so strange at the time, now loomed like a dark premonition, an eerie echo of the tragedy that had already taken place. As detectives began to unravel the events of that tragic morning, the pieces of evidence they uncovered told a story more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. It began with a small but chilling discovery: hotel security footage that captured the last moments of young Hannah Yanko's life. In the footage, Channel Yanko, Hannah's mother, appears in the hotel lobby, pushing a stroller through the main corridor. For those reviewing the footage, it was an unremarkable scene at first glance, just a mother with her child. But as they zoomed in, detectives noted a small, unmistakable detail. Through a small opening in the stroller fabric, they could see the tiny foot of 17-month-old Hannah, innocently peeking out, kicking lightly. The image, haunting in its simplicity, would be the last time Hannah was seen alive. As the security team fast-forwarded the footage, the narrative took a dark and devastating turn. Shortly after the lobby footage, a camera positioned near the hotel's second-floor staircase captured another moment that sent a chill through the room. In this footage, a tiny figure, a child, fell from the third-floor balcony. The silent descent was sudden, swift, and irreversible. As Hannah's small body struck the grass below, she tumbled and rolled onto the concrete sidewalk, coming to a tragic halt. The detective said, "The moment we reviewed that footage, everything changed. We could see clearly what had happened that morning. There was no hesitation in Channel's actions, no accidental slip. It was deliberate, and it was shocking. It's not something you ever expect to witness." The footage was damning, but investigators needed a conclusive understanding of what had led to this tragedy and what, if anything, had taken place before that fateful moment. They began combing through the scene, documenting every detail. Near where Hannah's small body had fallen, they found traces of blood spattered on the concrete, mingling with remnants of the grass where she had first struck. A white blanket, partially draped over the sidewalk and smeared with dirt, lay abandoned nearby, a silent witness to the morning's horror. In the hotel's parking garage, investigators made another disturbing discovery. Inside a trash bin, Hidden among the refuse, they found a crumpled trash bag containing items that left no room for doubt. There, amid children's toys and snacks, lay a skinning knife. Investigators would later report, with a long, narrow blade that suggested a sinister purpose. Beside it lay Hannah's hotel room key, an unmistakable link tying Channel to the room, to her daughter, and to the terrible morning that followed. The detective said, "When we found the knife and key, it all started to make a dark kind of sense. The scene, the footage, the items she discarded, all pointed to a single tragic conclusion. The haunting footage and the grisly evidence found in the trash would serve as key pieces in a case that only grew darker with every new detail." Channel Yanko had left the hotel grounds that morning, stroller in hand but empty of the child who had been in her care. Another security camera captured her as she wandered near the Victorian condominium complex, visibly disoriented. The stroller conspicuously empty, a mother without her child, her eyes vacant, her movements aimless. For detectives, each piece of evidence seemed to echo the same heart-wrenching truth. They were faced not with an accident, but with something far more deliberate. Channel Yanko, a mother entrusted with her daughter's care, had knowingly and intentionally severed that bond in the most tragic way imaginable. The trail of clues led investigators from the tragedy in the hotel lobby to a chilling discovery in the parking garage. Tucked away inside a trash bin was a discarded bag containing an assortment of items as unsettling as they were revealing. Among them were small personal belongings, unopened children's snacks, tiny toys and diapers, items meant for a young child's comfort and care. Yet, nestled alongside these innocent items was something that felt chillingly out of place, a sharp, narrow-bladed skinning knife. Each item seemed to tell part of a fractured story, with the most striking find of all a blood-stained blanket hinting at the tragic events that had unfolded. The detective said, "That bag was more than just discarded belongings. It was a snapshot of abandonment." To see items meant to care for and protect a child thrown away like waste felt symbolic of what had happened. The knife, the child's toys, the snacks left as if none of it mattered. It was like a scene set to shock us, to make us feel the horror of what had occurred. For the investigators, each item was like a piece of Channel's hidden intentions. The room key card connected her unmistakably to the hotel room, tying her directly to the crime scene. The child's belongings, the toys and snacks were painfully ordinary, fragments of what should have been a safe, protected life for young Hannah. And then, the skinning knife placed among them presented an image that defied understanding, a tool both foreign and foreboding. What was the knife doing there, wrapped up with a child's playthings? Chief Bali said, "This is one of the most heartbreaking cases I've encountered in my years of service. It goes against every natural instinct, every bond of trust between parent and child. All children deserve to feel safe, especially with their mothers. Seeing that trust shattered is something you don't ever forget." For Chief Bali and his team, this case was more than just an investigation. It was an affront to the very values they swore to protect. The betrayal of trust was not only shocking, but deeply unsettling. In their minds, the image of Hannah, a child who had only just begun her life, was now tied forever to this tragic narrative of neglect, danger, and heartbreak. With the investigation underway, one voice in particular shed light on Channel's behavior in the hours leading up to Hannah's death: Channel's sister, Mercedes. Mercedes had initially been unaware of the tragedy unfolding. That morning, she had left the hotel briefly to visit her fiancé at a nearby property. Mercedes' last memory of Channel that morning was seeing her sister in the hotel lobby, pushing the stroller they shared for Hannah. To Mercedes, nothing seemed particularly unusual. She assumed Hannah was safe, bundled inside the stroller as her mother pushed it out of sight. Yet, as they parted ways, Channel had done something strange. She insisted, several times, that Mercedes stay away from the hotel. Mercedes said, she kept saying, "Don't go back. Just don't go back to the hotel. It didn't make sense to me at the time. She was so insistent, but I brushed it off. Now I look back and wonder what was going through her mind. I can't shake the thought that maybe, somehow, she knew what she was going to do. I keep thinking if I'd gone back, if I'd ignored her warnings, maybe things would be different. The weight of Mercedes' testimony echoed in the investigation room. Her account painted a picture of a mother with mounting secrecy, a woman who seemed, in those final moments, detached from her family's shared reality. Mercedes' recollections of Channel urging her not to return, of her own innocent belief that her sister was simply being protective, now bore a sinister weight. Channel's cryptic insistence wasn't merely unusual. It was the harbinger of a tragedy that, in retrospect, seemed almost premeditated. In the days following the incident, a thorough autopsy was conducted on 17-month-old Hannah Yanko. What the forensic pathologist discovered added an even darker layer to an already harrowing case. Not only did Hannah suffer severe blunt force trauma from the fall, injuries that alone would have been fatal, but there were also 3 distinct puncture wounds found on her back. Strikingly, these wounds were absent on her clothing or the blanket in which she was wrapped, meaning they had been inflicted directly upon her skin. This single horrifying detail painted a picture far worse than an accident or even a moment of maternal confusion. It suggested that these wounds had been deliberately inflicted before her fall, a brutal indication of intent, made all the more painful by the knowledge that they had been caused by someone she should have been able to trust. Channel Yanko has since been charged with capital murder, accused of taking the life of her own child with deliberate and premeditated intent. Under Texas law, capital murder charges are reserved for the most grievous offenses, those that shake the very foundations of society. For the Galveston Police Department, for Chief Doug Bally, and for the community, this charge was seen as the only fitting response to the events of that October morning. Channel Yanko is being held without bond, an acknowledgement of the severity of her alleged actions. Her fate now rests with the courts, and as her trial approaches, the prosecution is expected to lay bare every detail of that tragic morning. The district attorney's office has made clear its intention to seek justice for Hannah. Prosecutors are working tirelessly to assemble a case that, they believe, will reveal the full extent of Channel Yanko's actions. As the investigation deepens, they are leaving no stone unturned, pursuing every lead and piece of evidence that can offer insight into what could drive a mother to such a dark and devastating act. In the end, the case of Channel Yanko versus the state of Texas will be about more than just punishment. It will seek answers to the unanswerable, accountability for the most profound betrayal of trust, and perhaps some measure of peace for those who must carry on in the wake of this tragedy. As the trial looms, the gravity of the case weighs heavily on everyone involved, a solemn reminder of both the fragility of life and the consequences of unimaginable actions.